I feel like the overall quality of my interior has just skyrocketed. Except for that thing that I didn't put back right. So in the last video, I said something about my car kind of being torn apart, and that's why we didn't take my Corvette to Mondays Don't Suck. And specifically, I had said something about my interior being torn apart, which as you see here, it is. That seat's still in here for about another 5 minutes. But if you see, center console's out, shift bezel's out, pretty much all this stuff is torn out. And that is because I decided I wanted to kind of redo some things. The reason that the center console was out was because, well, if it's not obvious by the fact that I have a missing seat, I do plan on replacing my seats. That's happening today. However, obviously the center console and the radio bezel don't actually have to be removed in order to do the seats. Well, that's where we get to one of the other things that I wanted to address on the interior. And that was the previous owner removed a few of the panels and painted them gloss black, and I didn't like that. On top of that, I had the Metra double dent head unit bezel, which was like this flat black. It was not the same shade of black as the rest of the interior, and it really bothered me. But up until this point, it didn't really bother me enough to do anything about. But once I started trying to improve the quality of the interior, it became very glaringly obvious that that was something I was going to need to address. So the plan was to take those out, sand them down, repaint them. And I did film part of this process, but I ended up scrapping that video because, well, it went disastrously wrong. And, well, let me walk you through that.
As things do.
So, as you can see here, this is, well, my center console. And as you can also tell, it looks pretty terrible. Now, I would like to preface this by saying I did everything by the book. I 320 grit sanded it down with an orbital sander. I then made sure it was nice and clean, hit it with some filler, primer, and then did a coat of the sandalwood primer. There were no inconsistencies, everything looked good. And so I hit it with the first coat of paint. And about halfway through the coat, the can just started spitting the paint out. It wasn't spraying anymore. And I looked down and there was paint running out of the top of the paint can. So I was annoyed. I had already been 2 hours in and I said, all right, I'm gonna go to bed, I'm gonna start this tomorrow, I'm gonna resand it down, and I'll just start over. And I had a look and I realized something else. That is, in the process of putting it back, it looks like the previous owner, when he put the console back in the car, it looks like it got snagged on probably the seat belt receptacle, and, well, it cracked it. So that annoyed me even more. So I went inside, annoyed, I started to put together a game plan, and then I ordered this. A new console, because I wasn't gonna redo all that. So what we're gonna do today is we're going to install our new console. We're gonna unbox these new seats, and I'm also going to be installing a different head unit bezel, different shift bezel from VetNuts, because I feel like the quality of that one is just significantly better. And by the time all of that ordeal was done with the, well, the old console, I didn't want to paint anything. So let's get started. All right, so sorry if you have a hard time hearing me over the fan, but it's crazy hot in here. So Tyler is currently in the process of removing those front bolts. They're 15 millimeter, really easy to get off. You do have to slide the seat forward, or, you know, oh yeah, no, I don't need to put the battery back in because the passenger side isn't powered. The passenger side is a manual, so I'm not gonna plug the battery back in. So Tyler, just slide the seat forward and that's how you'll get access to those back there.
Same way we
can already tell just by looking at it, this is, the underside of that seat's not gonna be clean. Thank God for vacuum. Now while he's doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start on this console because there is something that I do have to transfer over, and that is this one right here. It's a little bit dirty, I need to clean it, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out while Tyler finishes getting that seat out. All right, so console lid is on. as you can see, opens.
That's perfect.
Well, maybe. You have to pull these out. It's really difficult to... You know, we're just gonna leave it closed for now. So the console lid is now on, and as you saw, that's very easy. There's just these 4 screws you undo on either side, or on the underside, screw the new one on, and bam, new console. So, or new armrest. Bam, new armrest. So, now we can, well, I do need to transfer the lock mechanism over, and that's it. I can actually start, I can put this guy in the car, but we need to get this passenger seat out real quick. So you do kind of have to finagle the passenger seat out a certain way. Picked it up, turn to the front. Yes, that's what it was. Pick it up, turn the front, and then very carefully, because you obviously don't want to scratch your trim panel. Yeah, I'm gonna hit this with a vacuum though, and we'll get the new seat mounted on its bracket and tossed in here. Let's knock that out. So these are the seats that I chose to be my everyday drive around on the street seats. Corbeau actually designed the Evo X or Evo 10, whichever you want to call it, specifically for the C5 Corvette, because there's actually very little room in the cabin. The factory seats are extremely narrow because there's just not a whole lot there. And that has to do with the fact that the torque tube actually passes in between the 2 seats. And so that's why you have that really elevated center tunnel there. So it's really hard to find seats that'll fit in this car. And so, well, pretty much no one made a reasonably priced seat. Sparco has a couple of options, but they start at like $1,200–1,300 and they're pure racing seats. So Corbeau decided to fill that gap in the market. Now at this point, I think there are other manufacturers. I've seen Brom, Cypher, stuff like that, but those really only kind of appeared over the last couple of years because I am very particular about safety. I wanted to make sure it was a seat that was going to be tried and true and was going to have proven quality. So I went with the Evos. Now, the seat is sitting on its base, but before we put it in, we are actually going to go ahead and throw the new shifter / radio bezel in there. And so that is this guy right here from Vet Nuts. And one thing I'm actually pretty happy about is, first of all, the texture, everything there. I don't know if it's focusing. I mean, that is a very factory-esque style. It has these guys here, the mounting brackets. So we're gonna get this installed and then the seats will go in, and then the interior is, well, ready. So let's see what we can do here.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
All right, so I decided to stop messing with that because for some reason I just can't seem to get it to fit right. So what I am gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and put the seat in here so I'm not sitting on the floor the entire time. And I did want to actually show putting the seat in because there is kind of a trick to getting fixed back seats in here. It's a little bit more difficult. Same way effectively I took the factory ones out. So it would come in like this. Now I do know on these studs, the placement of them is a real pain. I actually test fitted the one of the bases before I did this. And you had to like really drop it in there at a specific angle. Maybe that one? No, this one isn't on. Yes! I think it's kind of stiff, but I think these are on. There's 3. All right, so it is the next day. We both got to a point where we were just not really making a whole lot of progress on the car anymore because it's just so unbelievably hot. And for reference, for those of you who are from Texas, you get it. If you're not from Texas, then we haven't had a high under 100 degrees for, I think now, almost 3 weeks. And so working in this garage, it gets really hot, especially since we're also working in the interior of the car. The other thing is filming slows the process down, and I just kind of wanted to get through it. After mounting the seats, everything else is pretty straightforward. I mean, really it's just, you know, getting that center console back in there, getting the new shift bezel in there and everything. I did have to do some trimming and make some alterations, and I will go over that once I get on the road. But the interior of the car looks absolutely spectacular with these seats. So I'm about to jump in the car. I'm gonna take it for a ride. I have to go pick up some microphones from Jason Marasio. But anyways, I'm gonna hop in the car. We're gonna get this going. All right, so my first impression is the seat feels really good. The seating position is far better than the factory. There's a lot more bolster to it, so I feel like there's a lot more support there. I feel like the overall quality of my interior has just skyrocketed. And except for that thing that I didn't put back right. My head, I feel, is higher, but my actual position in the car, I feel, is lower, and I think that's just something that comes with a fixed back seat. You know, I'm not reclining as much as I would have in the factory seat, because if you know the Z06, then you know the factory seat doesn't actually lean all that far forward. In fact, there's a lot of play in it that I just always hated that. So in addition, the seats, their appearance is absolutely awesome. They look fantastic. It really, I feel like, really drastically increases the quality of the interior. The factory interior on these kind of has a bit of a cheap look to it. It doesn't feel all that well put together, and it's not. The factory interior really isn't put together very well. Man, the interior of my car is really dusty. So actually, and I'll tell you why, the Vetnuts radio bezel, shifter bezel, whatever you want to call it, it is a little bit more difficult than most other factory head unit, like factory bezels, in the sense of, instead of moving the entire radio stack slash HVAC control stack down to make room and shrink that little kind of change receptacle, change catcher, this actually moves everything up, which means you do have to do some modification to the radio cage and the dash. There's a little dash pad right behind the top of the bezel that you actually do have to cut in order to make this fit properly. The other thing is there's two brackets in the back of the radio cage that you also have to cut out, and then the radio will be able to sit in there correctly. Outside of that, everything else is pretty standard, especially since the center console that I got, it's a factory one. It's straight out of a parted out C5. So the center console, waterfall, all that stuff, goes in the same way it would go in any car. But now back to the seats, because I've kind of been driving a little bit with them now. Still not very far, and I haven't even gotten on the highway yet, but I'm about to. But I am already noticing they feel a little bit different under bumps and stuff like that. They're not as cushy, they're not as soft and squishy as the factory seats. The Z06 is a more track-oriented version of the Corvette. It's always been like that. And so I feel like they really dropped the ball on the seats that they decided to put in these things, because they're just not enough. In fact, while I was at LS Fest and I was running the car on the road course, everything about the car was spectacular. I mean, the car just performed so unbelievably well, but there was one problem, and that was the seats. The seats were the glaring issue to an otherwise absolutely perfect performance by the car. So of course that was the very first thing I had to do after LS Fest. I will say, with these seats, just simply based on the bolstering, they are very comfortable. You do feel a little bit more bumps and stuff like that. They feel a little bit stiff, but I suspect that'll change as time goes on. You sit in it more. I imagine they'll soften up a bit, but I think they'll probably always be more firm than the factory ones. But again, I like that because I think the factory ones are just too squishy and too... The best word I can come up with to explain the way they felt was non-committal. Non-committal. That's the best word I can come up with to describe it. Is they kind of wanted to be sporty, they kind of wanted to be track-oriented, they kind of wanted to be comfortable, and unfortunately what they did was accomplish none of those things. I mean, they're not horribly uncomfortable, and they're not horrible, you know, sport touring seats, and they're not horrible track seats, but they're subpar in pretty much all of those categories. Not to mention the build quality is just not very good. I do feel very, very planted. I feel stuck in the seat. I'm not moving around, nothing like that. I haven't taken on any hard corners, but probably this next weekend or so, I'll take the car somewhere where I can, you know, some nice, smooth, flat, untraveled back roads where I can, you know, really hit some corners and see how it feels, safely, of course. And I'll be able to really kind of make my judgment there. But I can tell you right off the bat, these are significantly more bolstered and significantly more, they're significantly better than the factory seats as far as your overall position in the seat and your ability to stay in the seat. I also do think that these will probably be a very good seat option for you if you're, you know, maybe want to do track days every so often. If you want to do like SCCA stuff, you should be able to run these at any SCCA event. They're not going to bat an eye. The other thing is, I didn't lose any clearance between my head and the ceiling, so you can still sit in these and fit very comfortably with a helmet, and that's coming from me being 6'1". So I imagine you should probably be pretty solid. Unless you're like 6'3" or 4 or 5, then yeah, you might have an issue. But honestly, if you're that tall, I'm sorry, C5 Corvette is just not the car for you. So things to think about. But so far, I mean, this is very comfortable. The seating position is extremely friendly. A lot of people, when they hear fixed back, they kind of get scared, and reasonably so if you've never sat in a fixed back seat or sat in a car that had fixed back seats. To people who worry about whether or not a fixed back seat is going to be comfortable or if the seating position is, you know, uncomfortable, remember, endurance race cars have fixed back seats in them. So they are designed to have you in a optimal and in a at least reasonably comfortable seating position. Now here's the thing, when it comes to the seating position, if you like leaning back real hard, you're not going to get that from a fixed back seat. This is going to give you the best possible seating position that you can have in the C5 Corvette. So as far as do I recommend it, so far 10 out of 10, 100% I recommend it. The only thing that I could possibly see changing that, and I highly doubt it, is long trips. Long trip might be a little uncomfortable, but to be honest, a long trip in a Corvette is uncomfortable no matter what. So that's kind of my thoughts. My last thought as far as the seating position, Corbeau does have another option that's really great for the Corvette, and that is the A4. The A4 is a little less sporty, although it's still better than the factory one. It's still, the bolstering is still better. Everything about it is still better. It's a little less aggressive than the Evo, and it is reclining. So that's just something that if you're still not sold on the fixed back, look at their A4. They have more options as far as material anyways. They have a wide option. I can tell you if your waist size is over probably 34 inches, this is probably not a super, well, maybe 36 inches. If you're 36 and up, this might not be a super comfortable seat for you. The A4 is probably a better option. And definitely don't get the Forza. They say that it fits up to a 38-inch waist. Maybe in the straight, like maybe technically it fits a 38-inch waist, but practicality, it does not fit a 38-inch waist. I can tell you, and I'm not a 38-inch waist. I can tell I'm a 32, and it does not fit a 38-inch waist. At least the Forza for certainly does not. This, you can probably make it work, but I will tell you, you'll wear out the seat bolsters much quicker. So that's my thoughts. I've enjoyed it so far, and after I have an opportunity to take it out on some back roads and give it a little bit more of a aggressive driving review, I'll upload something. I probably won't do a standalone video for that, but you know, I'll include it in probably one of my other videos. So that's pretty much it for now. I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. And if you have anything else that you're interested in seeing, feel free to let me know. I will say, here in the next, probably for the next month or two, I'm not going to be doing that many videos, simply because it's blisteringly hot. It's 104 degrees outside right now, and I don't have an air-conditioned shop. I have a garage like most of you do, and it's too much. I will do stuff, but I'm not gonna be doing weekly videos with that. So that's where we're at. I'm gonna leave it off there. You guys, like I said, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll catch y'all later. See ya.